Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to what are we up to? Episode 15 of Might Help, Can't Hurt. Conversations with leaders, doers, and friends. And my leader doer friend today is Miss Mavis Karn. And you can, basically the game Mavis and I tend to play is I put her up on a pedestal, she jumps off. I say incredibly nice things about her. She deflects them. I talk about the impressive work she's done all around the world in the last 40 years. She goes, yeah. So we'll just, we'll do our dance, shall we? Um, but, but I could not remember. Clara was asking me, did we meet at a conference in Minneapolis, or did I make that up after the fact?
I have no idea.
Okay, so I may well have made it up, but I came across Mavis actually originally in a book called What About the Big Stuff by Richard Carlson. And Richard Carlson, for those of you who don't know the name, is famous for a series of books called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And given what's going on in the world with the pandemic, in America, with the Black Lives Matter movement and the death of George Floyd, what about the big stuff seemed like a good sort of container for a conversation. Now, normally, if you're a regular watcher, listener of these, you know that they're completely impromptu. I cheated this time, and I actually asked Mavis if she would read something at the beginning of our time together, because it's this little piece that, if I remember the story right, and I'll ask you for the story in a minute, but if I remember the story right, you wrote because you didn't feel like buying socks for people, that has traveled around the world and impacted tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. But what was the original story behind this piece?
Well, many years ago, I did a 2-year project here in Minnesota where I taught what I and lots of other people teach to a bunch of kids that were in prison. So I went down to the prison every Sunday and did classes for these kids. And it was a blast. When they got over the idea that I was the wrong age and the wrong gender and the wrong color and all that stuff, we had a really, really wonderful time. And at the end of the 2 years, because I saw them also when they got out on parole, they were going to have a little party for me on my last day. They made a cake, it looked like they'd had a gang war on the cake. It was just the ugliest but dearest cake. Oh, anyway, right before I left to go, I thought I just want to give these kids something. I just loved them. I just wanted to adopt every one of them. And I thought, what, socks? There's a lot of kids. I don't know what to give them. So I just sat down and I wrote them a letter. And it took about 15 minutes because I was just, when you've either said or done something from just that nothing but love place. And it's just exactly what you wanted. And so I wrote him a letter and I made copies for all of them and I gave him the letter, and this poster's the letter. Somehow it found its way to the big boys prison in Stillwater, and one of the inmates that worked in the art department wanted to know if he could make a poster out of it. So it's entirely a prison project. So that's what it is. And you want me to read that?
I do. In all these years that I've known you, I've never heard you read it. I always wind up reading it out while you listen. I thought this time I'd reverse roles with you.
All right. So this is The Secret by Mavis Karn. Dear kids and former kids, I have a secret to tell you. Nobody meant to keep it from you. It's just that it's been one of those things that's so obvious that people couldn't see it, like looking all over for the key that you have in your hand. The secret is that you are already a completely whole, perfect person. You are not damaged goods. You are not incomplete. You are not flawed. You are not unfinished. You do not need remodeling, fixing, polishing, or major rehabilitation. You already have within you everything you need to live a wonderful life. You have common sense. You have wisdom. You have genius, creativity, humor, self-esteem. You are pure potential. You are missing nothing. The only thing that can keep you from enjoying all that you already are is a thought. One thought, your thought, not someone else's thought, your thought. Whatever thought you are thinking at the moment that feels more important to think than feeling grateful, alive, content, joyful, optimistic, loving, and at peace. That's the only thing that's between you and happiness. And guess who's in charge of your thinking? Guess who gets to decide where your attention goes? Guess who gets to write, produce, direct, and star in the moment you're in the middle of? You, just you. Not your past, stored thought. Not the future. Did you ever notice that it never ever shows up? Not your parents. They all think their own thoughts. Or your friends, ditto. Or school, or television, or situations, or circumstances, or anything else. Just you. Thinking is an awesome capability. Like any capability, it can be used either as a tool or as a weapon against ourselves and others. And just like with any other tool, we can tell whether we're using it for or against ourselves by how it feels. When we think against ourselves or others, we get in trouble. When we don't, we usually stay out of trouble. Feelings exist to warn us away from using our thinking to create trouble in our lives and to guide us back to our natural, healthy ability to live our lives to the fullest. So please remember that your thoughts are not always telling you the truth. When we're in low moods, feeling down, our thoughts are not to be trusted. Our IQs drop. When our thoughts pass and we lighten up, our thinking is once again creative, positive, our IQs go up. The only way you can feel badly about yourself and your life is if you think badly about them. It's up to you every single minute you're alive. It's always up to you. This is the best, most liberating secret I've ever learned, and I want you to know it too. With love, Mavis.
How'd it go down with the kids on the day?
Well, it depends on whether they were eating cake or giving each other garbage or whatever, I don't know.
Right.
I didn't ask them. I did meet a kid some years later that had been in that program, and he stopped by and we went out to lunch, and he opened up his billfold and he had the letter folded up in his billfold. He'd been carrying it around. And that might have been the only kid that it made any difference. I don't know. Somehow, though, one of the letters got to the prison.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that happened. So, it's kind of like my work. I can just tell people who they are and how beautifully they're made, but I don't get to decide if they listened or if they do anything with it. Mm-hmm. That part isn't any of my business, actually.
So one of the things you said kind of quite casually was, that at first these kids, saw that you were the wrong color, the wrong age, the wrong sex. And then once we got past that, how do you get past that? How did you get past that?
Oh, I think I just fortunately knew enough not to take it personally.
Right.
That's just what people do. If I didn't know what I know, I wouldn't have come back. Right. I thought, well, this is not going to work. My God, those are nasty people. But it's not that I enjoyed it. I mean, I've never been called so many god-awful names in my life under the breath because there's guards around. But it was understandable. they would not immediately see me as, oh, yay, Mavis is here. Like, why would they feel that way? So I don't mean I enjoyed it, but that's different than taking it personally, I think.
Right. And by the end, they were calling you OG.
Yes. Now I got to tell you, I'd forgotten that. I got to tell you that I didn't know what that was, and I didn't stop long enough to ask them because I thought it meant old grandmother or something. And as you and I know, it turns out that's not it. For those of you who are listening in, it means original gangster. And if you could see me, do I look like an original gangster? But it had nothing to do with that. That's just, it was it was sweet, actually.
No, very sweet. So, you talk about, and you and I have talked about this again and again, and every time we talk about it, I see something fresh about it. That all you do, I'm using air quotes, people, all you do is just share what you've seen about the kind of magnificence of who we are, and people either hear or don't hear. But how, I mean, how it's a strange question even coming into my head, but like, how do people make the leap from, because most people I meet all around society don't think they're all that, or they think they're amazing, but for kind of really small reasons.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that lets people hear that they're more than their thoughts, they're more than who they think they are?
I mean, how does that come about? Just because I say it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like if I walked up to you and went, you're really a Martian. I don't know that would do much for people.
Well, that's because they're not a Martian. But other than that, you know, you know what an insight is. You know what most people think an insight is. It's like an aha.
Hmm.
Oh, I never thought of it that way. I have another definition for an insight. I call it seeing in. When I first learned about how beautifully we're made and how our whole life experience is brought about by our ability to think and to experience that thinking through our senses. It's like I heard that a little over 40 years ago now, and I felt like the top of my head came off because I knew instantly that was true. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't throw a whole bunch of questions about it afterwards, but I knew it was true. I saw in. I saw. That's true. Now, I know people think, I'm 80 years old, and people think that that's how you get to be wise. You live a long time. Well, that's not true. It's like, who would make it up so that you don't get to be wise until you're almost dead? Like, what kind of an arrangement is that? So it's like the instant you can see that you were made of wisdom, you were made of common sense, you were made of that universal intelligence that doesn't fool around, it doesn't make mistakes. There isn't a flaw in creation, and we are of creation. Ergo, there's nothing wrong with us. It doesn't mean that there's nothing wrong with some of our thinking and some of our habits and some of our behaviors, but that's not us. That's just a reflection of the best we know at the time. And once we can see in, we begin to catch ourselves at thinking that's not in service to us. We catch ourselves making up stuff that isn't true. We get a little suspicious that our brain isn't always on our side. It lies to us. It's nothing personal. It's just telling us stuff that got stored in there. So once you kind of catch on to that, you start cleaning the attic. You start seeing, whoa, I'm not what I thought I was. I'm a way bigger deal than that. And so is everybody. I'm not better than or worse than anybody else. I am made of the same divine intelligence that all of existence is. That's a big deal. We are a big deal. We aren't our bad habits. We aren't our pasts. We're not our bad behaviors. We're not, like you talk about a pedestal. I'm afraid of heights. I don't live on a pedestal. It's like I didn't put me there. It's like you don't want to. I'm going to beat you up a little bit here. You don't want to do that with anybody. It's like people don't have anything you don't have. If when I'm passing this information on, I don't want people to think I'm the information. I'm just telling them, when you look at me, you're seeing what you know. You know what I know. I just lucked out and know I know it. And I trust it implicitly. It doesn't mean that more often than I'd like, some stupid ass thoughts come into my head. They do. But you know what the difference is now, Michael? I don't care.
Yeah.
I know they're just stupid ass thoughts, and I lose interest in them pretty quickly because they don't feel right. They're sour. They're itchy. I don't want them for lunch.
Now, there's a expression, and I've heard a lot of variations on it, but the phrase that comes to mind that was sort of the funniest to me was, "Are you trying to turn us into bliss ninnies?" and the reason I bring that up in the context of what about the big stuff is I've had a number of people struggle with the fact that they kind of know they could be feeling peace right now, but they don't want to, because they think if they feel peace, they'll leave the world to its own devices. And they don't want to leave the world to its own devices.
So would it be true that they think that being peaceful is not caring?
I think part of it would be peaceful is not caring, and part of it would be peaceful is not active.
Oh, okay. There's a lot of folks from the past that, like the Buddha and Christ and some other good folks. I wonder what they would say about that. Being loving and peaceful is not powerful and helpful and useful and kind and about the best thing you could do. You don't get stupid if you're peaceful. There is room for wisdom and positive response and the right next step. When we're worried and angry and frustrated and full of reactivity, we get a little blind, and we usually act out of habit instead of wisdom. I remember the first time, I don't know if I told you this, Michael. I remember this was years and years and years ago now. My office was in a medical building downtown Minneapolis, and there was this beautiful park across the street. And when I had time, I used to go out and just walk around a bit. And one day, it was the summertime, and I walked out into the park, and this was a few years after I'd kind of learned how it was constructed. And I walked into the park and I just got a few feet into the park and I heard this yelling and screaming obscenities. And I looked around, and a few yards away, there was a guy sitting on a park bench, and he probably, didn't ask him, but he was probably a homeless guy, because he was wearing kind of everything he owned and had a bunch of bags sitting on the ground, and he was yelling at me, right? And okay, now this part, to this day, I don't know what happened. I went over and I sat down by him, and I said something like, "Boy, it sounds like you're having a bad day." And he kind of, blinked and looked at me, and he said, "Yeah, man." And he started to, I think he was telling me about his bad day, but he was probably pretty inebriated, and slurred. I caught little pieces of it, but he talked for, I don't know, a few minutes about his bad day, and my heart just went out to him. He just looked just absolutely defeated. And I didn't have anything to say because I didn't know exactly what he was saying. So I just listened to him. And the more I listened to him, the more I thought, oh man, I wish he knew who he was. But then he kind of stopped, and I said, well, I'm so sorry that all that happened to you. I hope things get better. And he looked at me and he says, oh, yeah, well, you're a nice lady. And that's all he said. So I just kind of wished him well, and I went on my walk, and I was just thinking about him. And then all of a sudden I stopped and I thought, wait a minute, that is not how I usually would have handled that. I usually would have kind of looked around to see if the park police were there, or if I was feeling particularly cranky, I would have yelled back at him or something. I don't know, but I would not have gone over and sat down by him. That is not what I would have done. And I was stunned. I just stood there thinking, what, how did that happen? And all I know now about it is that that was just the right next step in that moment. And for whatever reason, I don't mean I intellectually knew it. At a deeper level, that I knew that was the right. I followed that. Now, all I'm saying about that is that our personal intelligence would talk us out of that, or think about it, or whatever, and we might make a different decision. But who we really are knows better. Knows. And I'm not saying it would always be the right thing to do to go and sit. I'm not saying that. In that moment, that was the right thing to do. At a deeper level, at that intelligence that we're made of, we know. And that is not inactive. That is not careless. That is not uncaring. That is us being who we really are. And that's the most powerful thing on earth.
The probably biggest thing that I am aware that I have learned from my time with you is just how terrible a listener I am. but I'm getting better. And I remember one of the ways you put it recently was, everybody really needs a good listening to.
Yeah.
And so what for you is the essence of a good listening?
Can I ask you something first?
Yeah, of course.
What have you noticed about your listening, if it's gotten better? What have you seen?
Well, I think the first thing I saw was how little I heard. Like how much of my time was spent in my head judging, but not saying my judgments, because that would be wrong, and arguing, but often holding back from my argument because that would be wrong. And just that most of the time I was listening to myself, kind of waiting for my turn.
Yeah.
And then as it's changed, as that stopped looking like a good idea, it's not even that I hear more in terms of the words, because the words were going in. I was pretty good at carrying a conversation. It's I feel them and I know stuff. Like I can feel them. I feel a sort of a connection that I used to associate being with Nina, my wife, or being with the dog sometimes, where like we're just there together. But then sometimes I just know stuff. I remember talking to this very important businessman, and he wanted me to know he was a very important businessman, and he probably was a very important businessman. And I'm listening to him in this kind of way that was unfamiliar to me, but I recognized. And I suddenly got, oh my God, you're a sweetheart. Like that was the last thing I would have thought about him, but I felt him somehow. And suddenly the whole conversation shifted because I wasn't now listening to an egotistical business guy. I was listening to this sweetheart who obviously for some reason felt he needed to present himself as important. And it totally changed the dynamic. And it totally changed where the conversation went.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you just described the difference between listening to your own mental activity while you think you're listening to someone else versus changing your stance, making it more important to understand what this person is trying to get across to you than any thinking that you're doing about it. Deciding that. It's like it happens in a click. Did you notice the click?
There was an absolute click. I mean, I didn't have that word for it, but it literally was this one moment of going, oh, you're a sweetheart.
Yeah, because you heard him, not his, you didn't get caught up in his words. You heard him. It's like once you've decided that it's more important for you to understand someone else, to just hear what's in their heart. Once you've decided that that's how you want to listen, that's what happens. Because you get so you can feel the noise in your head. Well, he's just a this or that, or do I agree with that or not agree with it? I wish they'd shut up so I could tell them this and this and this, or you get defensive and you're waiting for them to be quiet so you can present your side of the thing, or you're not distracted, you're not trying to remember something, you're not doing all that mental activity, because that starts feeling not right. So what happened to you is you started off for a few seconds with the old, noticed, and you let go of all of that. And what was left is listening until you could feel this, what I call it, this golden cord between your heart and theirs. And that's what a sweetheart. Or, I get it. And you may not even know what you get, but you get it.
Yeah, you told a story once about a kid in prison you were listening to like that, who didn't like it at all.
Oh yeah, I forgot that. I forgot. That was cool. I was the kids got to be outside in the commons area, and some of the kids were playing basketball, and I was sitting with this this kid, and he I he was just rapping on a bunch of stuff. It was just kind of a bunch of kind of egotistical, I'm a tough guy stuff. And I was just listening to him, and I wasn't there to correct him, or we were just watching basketball. And so I was just listening and listening. And at one point he said, "Stop that." I said, "What? What? Stop what?" And he said, "The way you're listening to me." And I said, "Well, what's wrong with the way I'm listening to you?" And he said, "Well, it makes me feel like I have to tell the truth." I about rolled down the hill. I was laughing so hard. It was just, I said, "Well, we can't have that." You don't want to be walking around telling the truth. But it was, honestly, I was just listening to him. And I was kind of like you. I thought he was the cutest thing. And he was the cutest thing. He just didn't know who he was. And he was in his head.
Now, is there, and I know the textbook answer to this one is no, but I kind of want to hear your answer, even if it's also no. Is there anyone who can't wake up to who they are, who can't see that, or who has a different version of it, or like, are we really all of this?
So the question might be, is there anyone that's incapable of having an insight?
Well, that kind of an insight, I guess. Yeah.
Any kind of an insight? No. It doesn't mean they're going to. It doesn't mean that. But no, if I believe that, I couldn't believe what I know. That we are just, we get so enamored of technology and all the, our phones. Oh my God, it's got this app and this app, and I can do this and I can do that. And it's nothing compared to the apps built into a human being. Absolutely. Just imagine that we can, in a split second, see something that we never saw before. We can, in a split second, have a thought that didn't come from our brain. It came to it. Now that's an app. We have emotions that 24/7 are letting us know the quality of the experience we're creating with our thinking. 24/7. They're always letting us know that the way we're thinking feels like this. Is that an app or what? And if we didn't know we had that, then we'd be stuck believing everything we think. And who can stay out of trouble doing that? Isn't that amazing? It's just amazing. Who thought all that up? It's like, I think I told you this. Some years ago, in the back of one of my magazines, there was a picture of a photograph of a great big turtle. I think from Venezuela. Not that that matters, but this turtle was looking up like this, and there was a bunch of bright colored little butterflies around its eyes. And I thought, what is that? That is the coolest thing. And the caption underneath said that this was a such and such a turtle, and these butterflies needed this turtle's tears for their reproductive process. And in turn, the turtle got its eyes cleaned. Who made that up? What? It's like, and that's just one tiny little bit of nature. Imagine what's possible for us. we just didn't know that there's nothing wrong with us. There's lots wrong with lots of our thinking, but that's not us. I mean, we should, once we wake up to that, once we just get it, that our best thoughts about ourselves aren't even close to how perfect we are. It's the coolest thing.
Thing. I'm going to go sideways a little. I spent half an hour last night Googling you because I couldn't find a bio. Like I knew I had one at one point for something else that we did a few years back, and you literally your cybersecurity team have done a great job of scrubbing you, so that you don't actually exist. But what I remember from when I did see a bio of you a few years back is that you were involved in some kind of project with Bishop Desmond Tutu.
Oh no, it wasn't a project. I just got invited through a friend. I got invited to dinner at his home, but the project was a friend of mine had a small little thing, and we went to Africa a few times to help the women in Kayalicha, which is one of those kind of shanty towns that have grown up around the big cities. People have come down from the wars and the famines in the north and live in these, and there's millions of people living in these cardboard homes and so forth. And my friend had one of her good friends was Archbishop Tutu's daughter, Naomi. And she invited us over, and Archbishop Tutu's been one of my heroes for a long, long time. He's about this big. And
for those of you listening and not watching, that was about 1.5 inches tall.
He's just magnificent. He's just nothing but humor and kindness, and he's an amazing listener, just amazing. And it was a kind of a rainy day in South Africa when we went there, and I had been wearing sandals with socks because it was a little chilly, and by the time we got there, my socks were wet, so I took them off. And I can't remember how it came about, but somehow or other, I guess I was carrying my socks or something, but he said, "You don't have any socks on." And I told him that's what he said when he opened the door. "You don't have any socks on." That's not what I expected from my hero.
What you want your hero. That's when you meet your heroes, you want the first thing they notice to be your lack of socks.
Anyway, so he said, "Would you like to borrow some of mine?" And I said, no, I'll be, oh, I wish I would have borrowed them. I would have framed them and put them on the wall. But he was better than I thought he was. And I thought he was pretty much close to God. He was better than that. He was ordinary. Mm-hmm. He was a human being that was just living from love. And he used to stand at the door of the cathedral, of which he was the archbishop. And when the South African police during apartheid would come and try to get him to give up some of the people that were in sanctuary in the cathedral, and he would stand at these huge doors and say, "No, you can't come here." And they could have just gone, like, flicked them off, but they never went by him. Mm-hmm. Now that's Powerful. And he wasn't being unkind. He was just saying, no, this is God's house. They're safe here. And he did that time after time, go into the middle of really dangerous things and just go with love and purpose. He was an ordinary human being that knew who he was. Right? That's who we are. We don't want to think that other people are made of better stuff than us. We're all made of the same thing. We all have capabilities that we would just be astonished to know.
I'm not sure genuinely if this is a stupid question or not, so I'm going to go with it. But if somebody's listening, they want to make a shift from purposeful anger to purposeful love. How do they do that? Like, they don't want to just go to love without purpose. Like most of the people I talk to who are active, who are campaigners, who are protesters, who are social justice, I mean, warriors is a word they quite like. They, of course, they'd love to feel peaceful, but they're almost terrified that if they let themselves, they'll abandon the cause. How do you make that shift?
I just think it's the other way around. It's like that's a worry, right? That's a what if thought. If I do this, then this will happen. What if the most powerful thing you can bring to any interaction is love? I don't mean personal affection. I don't mean that. I mean, I don't mean I love this person because they're tall or they're short or they're cute or they're good at this or whatever. I don't mean that. I mean that the deepest, kindest feeling you can be in. What if you bring that? What if you just, even if you don't believe it, if you entertain the idea that you could be the one person in any interaction that brings the nicest feeling you can, and that's the most powerful thing you can do. Just, you don't have to believe it. Just consider the possibility there could be some truth in it, because actually inside you, you already know that. You just get scared that it won't work. That there are things that won't work about. You don't get stupid when you're coming from love. You don't necessarily ever take any action. You do. You take what occurs to you to do, but it's not going to be evil. It's not going to be violent, but it's going to be powerful. But it won't feel like that. It'll just feel like you're just being yourself. I remember you mentioned Richard Carlson earlier. He co-wrote a book with a friend of his where they just interviewed people who just seemed to have some sort of inner strength, inner power. Is
that the Handbook for the Soul?
I can't remember. No, that's somebody else.
Okay.
Anyway, he talked about a man that, his name is Carl Rogers. He was a psychologist long time ago. Anyway, he believed in unconditional positive regard towards his clients. And That's a wonderful phrase, isn't it? Unconditional positive regard. Anyway, Dr. Rogers was doing this big demonstration in front of all kinds of shrink type folks, and he was gonna do an interview with a client, and it was just Dr. Rogers and the client on the stage, and he was about to start the interview, and he turned towards his client, and then he stopped and he turned back and he said, "I just realized something." He said, "Before I begin my work with anyone, I remind myself that I am enough. I'm not perfect at everything, but I am enough." And then he turned back and started talking to his client. That's something, huh?
Mm-hmm.
We are enough. Who we already are, our true selves, are enough. What we're made of is enough. And we're all capable of scaring ourselves to death about what if. Well, yeah, but what if this happens, and what if this happens, and what if this happens, and all that really is us terrifying ourselves with our own imaginations, thinking that if we just do exactly the right thing, then bad things won't happen. We think we're in charge of outcomes. None of us know how the next minute's going to turn out, and we never will. We make educated guesses, sometimes uneducated guesses, but the point is, we don't know how anything's going to turn out. Isn't that great? We don't have to concern ourselves about how anything's going to turn out because we can't know. So you want to fall in love with not knowing. Just be who you already are, because you're enough. It doesn't mean we don't march. It doesn't mean we don't hold our leaders' feet to the fire. It doesn't mean that we don't do what needs doing. But when we do it from who we really are, there's power behind it instead of noise and ego and judgment and watch out for the others.
I'm kind of thinking you earned OG. Mavis, it has been, as always, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for
Thanks for inviting me.
coming to be with me.
Take good care.
You too. I'll talk with you soon.
Bye.